Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the first of 3 trainings regarding implementing MOUD in carceral settings. My name is Becca Newman, and I'm a project coordinator at the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice, the CBHJ, which is a community-based research center providing local communities, organizations, behavioral health, and law enforcement agencies across Michigan support. The CBHJ provides technical assistance, evaluation, and support to optimize diversion of individuals from jail and prison through the implementation of best and innovative practices at every intercept of the criminal justice continuum. Today's event is the first of 3 trainings in partnership with MDHHS, providing valuable specific information related to implementing the CBHJ MOUD model in facilities. This event is made possible because of the expertise provided by champion stakeholders doing this groundbreaking work. 3 housekeeping items before we get started. Audio visual capabilities have been turned off for attendees to limit distractions throughout the presentation, but we do encourage you to ask questions of the presenter using the Q&A box. You can do this in your screen at any time. We will address the questions as time permits during the roundtable discussion portion of this event. If you are calling from a phone, you press *9 to raise your hand and ask your question. Thank you, and on to our first expert panelist. Renee Casey is the Director of Community Corrections and Services in Washington County. Renee began her career in corrections after graduating from the University of Toledo with a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice and receiving her certification through the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy. Over the last 23 years, she has held a variety of positions within corrections, working both inside correctional facilities and through community corrections. Renee has been Director of Correctional and Reentry Services for the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office since 2015. She's responsible for overseeing all alternatives to incarceration programs, pretrial services, jail programming and services, population management, and has worked to design, develop, and implement a reentry program for the Washtenaw County Jail. Renee, you've been instrumental in providing the community that you serve. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Renee Casey, and I'm the Director of Community Corrections and Correctional Services for the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. Next slide, we'll just jump right in. I believe it was right before the COVID pandemic kind of took over everything and turned everything upside down for everyone. We were working to implement medication-assisted treatment programming in the Washtenaw County Jail. Despite the challenges that COVID has created, we have been able to implement that program and get it up and running. And we've had several participants and successful participants return to the community as a result of the treatment services they were provided or started while they were incarcerated. It wasn't easy. It was a very long and challenging process with lots of twists and turns and hiccups, but we were able to work collaboratively with our local provider, learn a lot together as we went through it, and as I mentioned before, have been successful in having the outcomes of the program actually start. In preparation of what to expect for anybody who is looking to start an MAT program at a correctional facility is exactly what I just said, right? It takes time. This is not an easy process to set up. It's not something that can be or will be done overnight. And so as you start to have your conversations and you start to do your planning, just understand that, it's a process and it's a journey. And so if you find yourself being frustrated with, the timing that it takes to get things put together, you're not alone. And it's completely normal. Working within a correctional facility itself can be challenging. I'll save that. I know we have a couple other individuals on as panelists that are going to kind of go through that piece of things. But again, going into the planning process, just understanding that, the correctional environment itself can be new, especially to treatment providers and community providers, and just understanding that it can be challenging. Not intentionally or in a negative way, but just learning how to navigate that system itself. But it can be done and it can work. And I think that's the thing to continue to make sure that you tell yourself as you're going through your process is it can be done and it can work. You just have to find ways to do so within your community. The best thing to do is find a champion or an advocate within the correctional facility or the system in which you're trying to implement the MOUD program. If you have someone on the inside is as passionate about these types of programs and the support and the success and the outcomes anticipated, it makes it a lot easier for you to come in and start to plan and navigate those systems. It requires a tremendous amount of collaboration and flexibility from both sides. So as you know, the community provider, the treatment provider and clinician, as well as from the correctional side of the house and the command staff, everybody just has to work together and be flexible. You're probably going to change the plan several times before the end result is implemented and up and running, but you have to come to the table with that in mind and be willing to do that. And it requires a common goal. You have to want the same things for the individuals that you're working with inside the correctional facility. So upfront, start talking about what are the outcomes that we want to see for the incarcerated population? What are the outcomes that we're hopeful to bring to the program and to the table? And once you share a common goal, share a common vision, it really makes those conversations a lot easier and the planning process go a lot smoother. Next slide. Typical challenges, I talked about it is challenging, but it can be done, it can work. But again, coming to the table, understanding it up front and clearing up kind of that communication or that line of communication is really important. Some of the challenges is that facility policies and community provider or treatment provider policies don't necessarily always line up. There's several things that within a correctional facility just are not feasible or realistic. And it sometimes doesn't apply to incarcerated individuals. And so as the community provider or treatment provider, understanding that there may be that rub between policies, but then identifying them, talking through them and agreeing to move forward to find one that works for both of you is the best way to approach that. Sometimes the medical services that are contracted within the correctional facility, their policies and procedures don't necessarily line up with what we need to occur for an OUD program. It's just as important to have the medical provider at the table during the planning and implementation phase as it is to have the correction side of the house and the treatment provider at the same table. Going into it, understanding how medical services in that jail or correctional facility work is really, really important to planning. Facility medication policies. Sometimes different facilities have different policies around when and how they can distribute certain medications and what medications can be distributed. Again, one of those things that if you have the conversation up front, you understand the why or you understand the practice behind it, it makes the planning and implementation process much smoother. Schedules and access to incarcerated individuals, staffing and COVID restrictions and precautions, I'll lump those all into one. COVID is still a reality that and a challenge that correctional facilities are continuing to navigate, not only from the pandemic itself, but the staffing issues around it and movement within the jail can create issues to access to individuals. So I'll lump those all together and just say we have to have an understanding of the limitations of what is feasible within the correctional facility and be able to design and implement the program based off that. It's not as simple as having a treatment provider come into a jail to do an assessment. It's not always as simple as getting an incarcerated individual to a phone to do an assessment or on a tablet to do a Zoom session. There's lots of things that from correctional side of the house plays into each one of those movements or each one of those access points that needs to be taken into consideration. And the other challenge is a lack of understanding or shared experience from both the facility and the provider. I think one of the things that we learned really early on here in Washtenaw County was there was a lot about the MOUD world that we didn't know. And there was a lot about the correctional facility world that our provider didn't know. And we went into it with a lot of probably assumptions that wasn't necessarily the best or accurate on either side. And so being able to talk about those up front and really take the time as a provider to learn about your correctional facility and in a correctional environment and vice versa, as the correctional side of the house, really being able to take the time to learn about the community provider and their processes makes everything go much smoother. Next slide. Confidentiality. So this is huge, especially when you're talking about treatment services in the treatment world, but shared releases work. So you don't have to have 10 different forms for 10 different providers and 10 different processes. we were able to really use one form approved by MDHHS and be able to share it amongst all of the individuals who are part of the process. So I would highly recommend on using one release early on in the process, doing it from the beginning. We have individuals signing that release right when they're coming in the door as part of their intake process. And then it's done, it's over with. And from then on, you can share it with everybody who's included on those release. Leverage non-uniform staff. So we have individuals working in our booking area that are non-uniform staff that we really leverage to do those initial screenings, initial release of information, signing, and so on. A lot of times people coming in the door, if they see someone in uniform who's trying to get them to sign a form or ask them specific questions or do some sort of quick screening for eligibility, they're going to be resistant. They're going to be suspicious, distrustful, whatever it might be. So if you're able to have non-uniform staff as part of your intake process, having them do those releases of information, those screenings and so forth, really provides an opportunity to engage folks on a different level. And facility confidentiality may be different than a provider. So that is one thing that treatment providers need to understand, is that things that happen and are shared within a correctional facility might not necessarily apply to the same standards or requirements within the treatment world. Not saying that you don't have to, be conscious of both requirements and obligations, but again, those are the things that you have to talk about up front because they're not always the same. Next slide. Meeting procedures with individuals. So again, we talked about this. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but COVID has created an environment within inside a jail that makes it somewhat difficult to move people around. It makes it somewhat difficult for partners and providers to have access to individuals. So just understanding that and being patient and being creative in ways to support one another is really important. Zoom, we do everything that we do right now through Zoom or virtual platforms. It's worked out fairly well. Understand that safety and security is the priority of that correctional facility, and it will supersede any and all other situations and policies and procedures that you may run into. So just understand during the planning process that if you're designing a program, there's that flexibility again, right? Build in the ability to adapt and be flexible because safety and security will always be first. Next slide. Reporting problems. So it's really important that you continue to keep lines of communication open during the process, the planning process, and even after implementation, and ask a lot of questions. That's how everybody learns, especially if it's new. If you don't have an existing or hadn't had an existing MOUD program in your correctional facility, everybody's going to be learning. So bring it up, even the small things, especially in the beginning. Even if you don't think it's important, it might be trivial or minor, ask the question. Have team meetings. So right from the very beginning, I would suggest that you gather a group of individuals that are your champions, your advocates, right? From the correctional side of the house, medical, potentially reentry services, the treatment provider. Develop yourself a core team. Have those teams meet regularly to talk about those questions, concerns, issues, and really share information back and forth. Have a process for direct communication. Go back to that point person within the jail, that champion or that advocate or the person that's assigned to oversee it. Open lines of communication are really, really important in this type of program. And so being able to go direct with someone who can answer the question and quite honestly has the authority to make decisions and point you in the right direction within the correctional facility is very important. If it's not shared, it can't be fixed. And so this is kind of a motto, if you will, that I share with all of my staff, right? Like if I don't know about it, I can't fix it. So again, it goes back to point one, which is bring it up, even if the small things, because if we don't know on the inside that it's creating a challenge or it's a barrier or it's not aligning well with a treatment model, we can't be creative and offer up solutions to try to fix it. I'll say again, you must have a common understanding of roles and procedures. So the treatment provider needs to understand life within the correctional facility and vice versa. And then always document. Standard process, right, in the treatment world and in the correctional world, but being able to not only document the information shared back and forth, but keep a running document of the questions that have come up and the way they were answered and the way you went about some of your decision-making process. It helps to have something to refer back to as the program continues down the road, or as staff changes, providers change, whatever it might be, you have something to refer back to. Maybe you've already been there, done that, so you don't need to recreate the wheel. Next slide. Working with corrections as an ally, again, find that champion or advocate. A lot of people view like the treatment provider community role and the corrections role as adversaries. They can work cohesively, they can work hand in hand. There are just as many people in the corrections world that really have the same vision and want the same outcomes as our treatment providers do. So being able to tap into those individuals and leverage them inside is really important. Understand the chain of command in your correctional facility. Every correctional facility has a chain of command, might be a little bit different depending on which jail you're at, but understand what that is and know who those individuals are in the event that you do have questions, need to seek assistance, or something's not working. Again, safety and security first. Understand and be prepared for the unexpected and be flexible. It's inside a jail. You never know day to day what's going to come up or what's not going to come up, but understanding that it might not always go as planned for today or even next week, but being able to make the adjustments to adapt and keep moving forward is really important. Next slide. I think that was it. Oh, nope, one more, sorry. Must-knows, find and agree on a common goal. We talked about that. Every facility is different. We talked a little bit about that, safety and security. Policies and procedures exist for a reason. I'm sure the other panelists will get into that a little bit more. Patience and flexibility, we talked about that. And again, having a mutual understanding and a common goal is really important.
Thank you so much, Renee. Next slide, please. Next up, we have Captain Julie Masson, who has 20 years of experience in service with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, including experience as Assistant Jail Administrator. Captain Masson is an Eastern Michigan University alumni and serves as a board member for several impactful causes. Additionally, Captain Masson has been instrumental in implementing MOUD in the Monroe County Jail, consistently providing leadership and championing services that will improve the lives of individuals passing through carceral settings in her community. Thank you so much, Captain, for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And first, I have to apologize that I'm having some technical issues, so I have to join you by phone. Actually, everything, Renee, that you said, you were spot on with it, and it's a lot to do with my presentation and my slides was a lot of the information that she gave. So I'll kind of go through this and kind of skip over where she already hit. Are you guys on my first slide there, preparing to enter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as is mentioned, that Michigan has 83 county jails. So as you venture through and wherever you're going to be entering county jails, you do have to keep in mind that every facility is designed and operated differently. Some of us have facilities that are direct supervision. Some of us have older linear style jails. So I just recommend that you do your research and kind of know the facility that you'll be entering. Most jail administrators, as long as there's no issue with COVID right now, would be also willing to kind of give you a tour and let you see the facility that you'll be working in. Monroe, like for us, we have two facilities and we operate both those facilities in two different fashions as far as how we manage the inmate population. Also, I wanted to note here that the jails are going to run a background check on you and run a lien just to make sure that you can enter the facility, that you don't have any prior felony convictions, and that there's not a risk to security. When we were starting our program, we did stumble through with some of the folks that were peer support specialists that had, as they went through their own addiction, that they would come up and have some criminal charges. The lien checks aren't to embarrass anybody or to get anybody upset. It's just we have to kind of, know what the charges were, and we can work through that. And as long as everybody's transparent, typically it's not an issue. Next slide, please. Something that doesn't probably seem like it would be important is super important, is that your attire is that of a professional person. You don't want to walk into a correctional facility and have on clothes that are going to draw attention to you that's unwanted. It should be the same that you would wear in a school setting. No revealing clothing. I recommend flat shoes. A lot of the jails have stairs. A lot of the jails, they're cleaning throughout the day, especially with we're going through the COVID protocols with the sanitation. The floors, as the way they're designed, like for our facility, they're very slippery when they're wet. Also recommend that you don't wear heavy makeup, perfume. Again, you're going to attract unwanted attention from the inmates, and that's going to kind of defer from what you're there for to talk about treatment. They'll just want to talk about the way you look. Next slide, please. For contraband, obviously, when you're walking into a jail setting, you have to be cognitive of those items that you would find to be everyday items, like an ink pen, to us is considered contraband. Before you enter a jail, you want to kind of pat yourself down. You want to empty out your pockets. You want to make sure that you're not taking anything inside that is not necessary or something that could be deemed a security risk. Cell phones, ink pens, staples, paper clips, all this stuff is something that an inmate doesn't have access to in the facility. So you want to make sure that you're not taking that in. Most of the jails have some sort of metal detector, whether it's a body scanner or a wand. They have non-intrusive body scanners, not the ones that we would use for the inmates. They may put you through some kind of metal detector to make sure that you're not bringing anything in. I just, again, recommend that you kind of check yourself, leave your purse in the vehicles or anything that you don't have to necessarily bring in to do your job. I would leave that in your car. Next slide. We do a safety training. I recommend all the jails do a safety training, that anybody that's coming in as one of your vendors, that they're going to kind of get educated on things like ink pens and paper clips and staples. Make sure that you know and are educated on the inmate manipulation tactics and the security protocols, so that way it's not a surprise to you. In Monroe, we also give our folks radio training, and if you're going to be in a room with an inmate, we give you a radio. That way, if there's an emergency, you can alert us or hit the button to alert us. We also want to train you on how to report safety violations or any kind of hazards that you may see. Also, we want you to know about the alarms, the evacuation plans that we have. If you hear something that goes off, we want you to know that how we evacuate the facility, and that you're going to be one of the first people that we get out of the building, just so that you know when you're a guest in our facility that you are safe. Next slide, please. Again, as a guest in the facility, it's important to educate yourself on the rules and regulations. Make sure that everything is clear. If you have questions, ask. We're happy to always answer, to make sure we're both on the same page. A big one that was huge when we were first launching is that our providers have to understand that you're going to have to wait on the staff. I know sometimes you see the officers, they would see them standing around or what they appeared to be standing around, but the officers have core duties that they have to do on a time schedule. You have to be very patient and understand that they might be getting ready to go run a security check or some kind of observation check, and that their corrections officer duties are priority and first and foremost. Again, you may be delayed during the activities of the day. We have meals that we have to pass. We have judges that will pick up the phone and call us and tell us they want an inmate to appear for court that maybe wasn't scheduled. Sometimes people walk in and just post bond, and we have to get a release out. We can get called for a rowdy booking that's coming in. We have to stop what we're doing and go assess that situation and bring that person in safely. We also have uncooperative inmates that can happen at a moment's notice, and then again, emergencies that arise. Oftentimes, we'll be in the middle of going through our day and a fight will break out, and we'll have to stop what we're doing and go run and secure that. So we always just ask everybody to be patient and understand that we're not ignoring you, that we just have to do our core duties first, and then we'll get to you. Next slide, please. Renee kind of hit on the HIPAA rule, so I'm kind of just going to skim over this. Sometimes people were a little bit apprehensive with us to kind of talk about medical issues and medical information. The corrections officers, as they go through the Corrections Academy in the state of Michigan, they are all certified in HIPAA. They are all trained, and they know the information that they're allowed to share and not share, and they know what's in the course of their duties, what information is imperative. For us as jail administrators, we are the custodians of these inmates, and I have to have all this information for their medical care. So we always ask everyone to be transparent, and it's just between those of us that are in the program that we know exactly what these inmates need and make sure that they have all their care. Also, it's very important as a guest in our facility that You know who's around you when you're communicating. You never want to talk about anything medical in front of an open area, because I guarantee you there's somebody in that area that can hear you, that you'll be within earshot. And once you say it, those guys will spread it through the jail. Next slide, please. Renee hit on this too with the paramilitary organizations, with the command structure. Every jail is different. This is just kind of ours. Just showing the example, just the corrections officers always have a supervisor on duty, and the sergeant is your first line supervisor. They should be the first person you communicate with. And next slide. It's important that as you're in the facility that inmates are going to be a little bit more comfortable probably talking with you than they are the staff, that you make sure that if you hear anything, any kind of suicidal comments, any kind of threats against the staff members, any kind of threats against maybe another inmate, or somebody may be talking about, you know, how they're going to get out of the facility. All that stuff's important that you report that immediately to that supervisor so that we can jump in and take over with that. If you're unsure if you should report it or not, it's always good to just lean on the side of caution and report it to us and let the jail staff determine and investigate if that's an emergent situation. Next slide, please. One thing too, after meeting with an inmate, you want to always make sure you have all your stuff back. They're really good about distracting you and getting you to, you know, not have your eyes on everything that you might have brought in with you. So if you brought in an ink pen, make sure you get it back. Make sure that pen's intact. If you have an item that's missing, don't leave and then call us. Make sure you report it before you leave the building. Let the staff know that something's missing so they can immediately check that area. Each facility is different on how they want you to handle when you're finished speaking to an inmate. They might want you to escort them back to a certain area, or they might want you to stay with them until they come back around and grab you. You have to speak with each jail to figure out how they want you to get that inmate back to their housing unit. Next slide, please. And the last one I have here is building relationships with the staff. Anything that we start new in the facility is going to be, sometimes you'll encounter unpleasant attitudes from the staff. They might see you as extra work, and they don't understand what the MAP program is or what it does. But once they find out and they have all the information and they're educated on what this does, then they see the value in the program. Any issues that you encounter with staff members, you're going to want to report those via the chain of command, again, starting with that line supervisor. Also, again, we don't want to wait and air a complaint later. We also ran into some issues with that, where the vendors that were coming in would give us, air a complaint a day or two later, and the officer they would be complaining about wasn't even on shift the day they said the incident happened. So for us, as we're investigating things, we need it to be brought to our attention immediately so we can make sure we have the officer's name, the date, the time of the incident. Again, we have videos, body cameras. We have lots of different ways that we can look into issues. If it's something that we need to look into, we ask that you bring that stuff to our attention when it happens, more so than later, because again, we don't want to get somebody else being accused of something that they didn't do. The officers definitely will see you as somebody who they don't want to trust if they think that you're reporting information that's untruthful. And that is it for my portion.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, Adam. Thank you so much, Captain Masson. Next, we're going to hear from Adam, who is the Jail Diversion Services Supervisor for Monroe County Jail. So we just heard from the sheriff in Monroe, and now we're going to hear from the Jail Diversion Services Supervisor, Adam, from Monroe County Jail, who leads the charge to maintain community safety through robust mental health service provision to individuals involved in the criminal legal system. Adam is a champion of collaboration and partnerships, continuing to strengthen the overall community while achieving goals of helping clients achieve their personal definition of recovery. Adam has been instrumental in building Monroe's jail diversion program from one clinician to a program that is the envy of the state, with an overall decreased recidivism rate from 32% to 27%. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today.
Thank you, Becca. Hey, everybody. I'm gonna take a little bit of a different angle here. I'm just a little background. So our diversion efforts here at Monroe started back in 2015. I came on board with the efforts in around 2016. and had the opportunity to serve as the jail clinician within the Monroe County Jail for a few years, and was able to really get an understanding of that relationship between mental health providers and the sheriff's office, and how that can really work together, building that relationship and making it successful. And then from there, we were able to launch many other programs within our county for more opportunities for people to find their path to recovery. So next slide, please. So what to expect? So it's interesting, and of course, I'm not trying to be negative or beat up on anybody here. Just some observations as I was thinking back to when we first started in the jail setting. As I was there, not to the fault of the COs by any means, but they are there to perform a specific duty, and as such, they see behaviors, they have a job to do, and disruptions to that job makes it very difficult, and so they are going to react and respond a certain way. So as you come in, like Captain Masson had alluded to, they may see you as extra work at the outset. You may get some cold shoulders, there may be some side conversations, and there's maybe some reference to those with SUD or mental illness as less than desirable references to who they may be or their person or whatever. But really that comes down to probably a lack of education into the field and into what it is that's really going on, and like I said, they have a job to do, and that's what they're there to do, and they're trying to perform that job to the best of their ability. So this opportunity to come in and work alongside them is pretty instrumental in being able to have conversations that are more productive and educate along the way about some of these people's backgrounds, how these things come to be, trying to build a little more empathy within the corrections staff to understand where they're coming from. And I can testify that it is effective, and I think that they are there. They do want to help people, and and so having open, honest conversations is very welcome. Next slide. Typical challenges. I probably should have put unpredictable releases first here, but maybe we'll save the best for last, right? So privacy, it was talked about a little bit. From my perspective, it is a bit challenging. We do have the luxury in Monroe of having our own office within the jail, thanks to the sheriff's office. That has been very helpful in mitigating some of these privacy issues. But as our programs grow and expand, and multiple people are meeting with multiple inmates at a time, that does become challenging. But I will say, I think as long as you have open communication with your sheriff's office about what is happening, as was indicated by the other panelists, that they're very willing to work with you and figure out and troubleshoot how you can figure out and work around those issues. Another thing that we've had some barriers to is, the meds being managed by a different provider within the jail, contracted providers for the medical needs. So, we're, as a community of mental health, we're accustomed to providing those medications, providing the psychiatric care, and the doctor prescribes something, they go to the pharmacy and they get it, and we monitor and watch that. So, but in the jail, that's a different prescriber. Their Medicaid is turned off, and so you have to work around that. And we've been able to work together with the sheriff's office and the contracted medical provider, and we have arrangement now where we have our psychiatrist meeting with the inmates over Zoom, and through a medical recommendation piece, we're able to have the medical provider in the jail then do those prescriptions for whatever is allowable within the jail setting, and then provide those medications to the inmates. And By doing that, we're still able to monitor those. We can report out to our psychiatrist what's been being done. She can continue to work on continuing to tweak that and manage that through recommendation status. And then once they come out back into the community, she can pick up where she left off. Unpredictable releases is an ongoing difficulty within the jail setting. Obviously, it's different than the prison setting. You don't have always those hard release dates. I mean, once in a while you do, but throughout the court process, you never know if they're going to get a PR bond or what's going to happen. And even if you do have a hard release date, they have good days, or there's sheriff days if there's overcrowding or COVID or whatever may be the case. And so, this what we found is a bit of a moving target, and we've worked on a lot of different methods to try to mitigate the difficulties here. And I think just the best thing to do is, again, through communication. We frequent the jail's court office and having conversations with them about what's going on with any certain individual at any certain time. We talk to POs as much as possible because they usually have a good beat on what's going on. We'll sometimes observe court hearings if we need to, talking with the individuals within the jail as well about their specific situations. And you just try to gather as much data as possible, but also being prepared for that release as best as possible. Planning for release from day one is very important, so that at least you had some conversation if they do get an unexpected release. Giving them resources, as much as possible, giving them contact numbers, gathering contact numbers from them to be as accurate as possible at all times. Next slide. Meeting with detainees. So jail safety is first, obviously, as our other two panelists alluded to a little bit already. We do go through the jail safety training, as Captain Masson had stated. But it's in some ways not a lot different than when we go and meet with anybody in the community. We are always trying to be very aware of our surroundings, where the exits are, body language, and all of those things. Not a lot of that changes. And in matter of fact, our sheriff would always say that you're safer here in the jail than you are in the community, which is really true. So we have the radios on, like Captain had said, and if things kind of start to go sideways, we can call for help. And I'm here to tell you that the COs will be there very quick. They do care about safety, and they are going to be there, and they will help out in a moment's notice. The ROIs, the releases of information, as Renee had said, we also use the shared release, which works really well. And we do work on getting those at booking as well. And that's just really helpful in a lot of ways. Obviously, if they're coming in and it's a difficult booking, or they're not quite sure at the booking process, we can always revisit it later and obtain it later. But we do work hard on gathering those things and putting on as many providers and entities on there as possible, whether it's their MAT provider, the sheriff's office, the medical provider, and then even collateral contacts from the community for when they're released that we can reach out to and make connection with. When you're meeting with the detainees, we found it helps have a very clear agenda. You're going to have a lot of different personalities, obviously, you're going to meet with. We find a lot of times that these detainees, they don't have a lot of things to do while they're in jail. So when they come out to meet with us, they just want to talk, and they know if they just continue talking, that delays the time that they have to go back to their day room. So having a clear agenda is very helpful, keeps the conversation on task and productive. And I think we found something very important to mention is knowing your role, right? Because as Captain had also alluded to, these detainees, they are very crafty. So you have to be careful. Knowing your role. I mean, you're not a lawyer, you're not a PO, you're not a doctor, you're not a CO. So basically staying in your lane. We defer a lot of people back to their lawyers, defer them to the COs. Remember where you're at. You're in the jail setting, we're guests there. We are the mental health professional, right? Always collaborating. We touched on that. A lot of people touched on that already. And follow through. If you're going to build trust with these detainees, you have to follow through because they will call you on it if you don't. And that's going to be the biggest #1 thing to maintain your rapport with them. Next slide. Reporting problems. We've touched on this too. I mean, I would just echo what has already been said. And just keep in mind that the notifying of risk of harm to self or harm to others is important, and it maybe looks a little bit different. I mean, obviously, if you are aware of drugs within the jail, that's a risk of safety, and notifying if you hear of any release or escape plans and things like that, right? Just going to the officer, the sergeant on duty, likely to report those things. Next slide. Working with corrections as an ally. This is an important slide, I think. So helping them find the win-win, right? So as I said earlier, they when you first come in, they may see you as more work. Once you start to help them put out fires within the jail, once they start to see that the people you're working with, once they have a relationship with us, their behaviors start to decrease. And all of those things, and basically they're seeing that actually they're making our jobs easier, right? That's going to be your biggest key in finding an alliance with them there at the jail. Once they learn that they can trust you too, they operate kind of like a family. And you're a guest there in their house, and you do enough of these things, and they start to invite you in to be part of their family. By going the extra mile wherever you can. Don't balk at their requests. Be happy to help out. You might be in the middle of something, and there might be a situation going on. They ask you to come down and assist. Not balking at that, but just going along with it and really helping out where they need you goes a long way. Brainstorming with them to include them in the resolve not only helps to psychoeducate them, but also helps to make them feel like they're part of the solution. And it empowers them to, want to help out with detainees more. You're a guest, like I keep saying, their policies, they come first, and you have to be able to respect that. Also, this is important too, when you're assessing, we're really cognizant about not telling the jail what they should do with a particular inmate. We communicate the risk. We're there to assess for risk of self to harm or others. And I don't go down and say, hey, you should place this person on suicide watch, or hey, you should do this, or hey, you should do that. I go down and I say, hey, I've assessed this person. They do seem to be a threat of harm to themselves. You should probably act accordingly, right? Because it's their jails, their policies. We're there to assess risk. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Okay. So now we'll go into the Q&A.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Adam. My name is Matt Costello. I'm a program manager here at the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice, and I'm going to be facilitating a Q&A roundtable with our panelists. First, a thank you to Renee, Captain Masson, and Adam for their excellent presentation. I also have the honor of introducing Captain Lindsay Cole from the Kent County Correctional Facility Sheriff's Office, who's agreed to sit on the roundtable discussion with us to answer some questions. If you want to ask a question, please enter it in the Q&A box. If you're on the phone, you press 9 to raise your hand and ask a question. So I'm going to go right away to a question I think I have for Captain Cole, if that's all right. Captain Cole, can you describe to me, as a civilian employee coming into the Kent County Correctional Facility for the first time, how do I get to the housing unit? What should I expect when I get to the housing unit? And how do I leave the housing unit in a way that manages that safety and security of the facility?
So like a lot of the other panelists have said, coming into any facility is going to be different. So how we bring people into our facility might be different than how other places do it. So typically when we have any sort of program employee coming into our facility, they're initially connected outside of the other things that have been discussed with the background checks and all that stuff. They're typically connected with a supervisor that is going to be walking them through those initial what to expect, or getting them where they need to go if that's the first time that they are actually in our facility, or connecting them with another program person who is familiar with our facility setting. If it's an employee that's going to actually be on site with us, and that's going to be their job assignment moving forward, is stationed somewhere out of our jail. Eventually, at some point, once they're at a comfortable level, they will actually have the ability to move around with freedom, if you will, in our facility to see their clients.
Very good. Thank you, Captain. Renee, can you talk about what helped you adjust to being a civilian employee working in a correctional setting? What, challenges that you might have experienced, but what helped you get through some of those?
Yeah, I have to say personally, for me, I started out my career as a corrections officer. So transitioning into the civilian role gave me a little bit of a different, probably unique perspective. I think, the easiest thing to understand is really a lot of what Adam was hitting home at, like you have to look at yourself as a guest within the facility, and how you would look at yourself as a guest if you go over and you're meeting, somebody's parents for the first time or whatever it might be, right? And then understanding, I think I hit on it a little bit, is that, breaking down the myth that the relationship between partner provider and corrections needs to be adversarial. It can be collaborative, and that there are, individuals that work within criminal justice and correctional facilities that do have the same intent, the same passion, the same drive to meet the same outcomes and goals as you do. So approaching it as a collaborative relationship from the very start, and understanding your role to support corrections and the safety security is really important.
That can be an interesting topic for another day, being on the law enforcement side, going to the civilian side too, because that's a big adjustment also. Adam, basically the same question for you as a civilian. What was your biggest adjustment into working inside of a jail? If there's a particular issue that came up that you kind of had to traverse?
I don't know. I think maybe just the initial culture shock, because it's quite a different culture than well, certainly what we're accustomed to in CMH, right? I worked at the community mental health outpatiently, and then in the hospitals and stuff like that. And you go to the jail, and it's quite a bit different. But once you really get to kind of know the ropes a bit more, you realize, well, maybe it's not quite so different. It's just a little bit. It's probably more the the underlying ideas that we have that maybe aren't truly based in reality. And then like Renee was saying, it really isn't an adversarial relationship. The corrections staff are there, and they do most of the time truly want to help these people. And if you can really, and a lot of times I think that they get frustrated because they just don't know how, a lot of times, right? They're there, there's these behaviors that are occurring. They want to help them, but they're frustrated, they don't know how. So we're there to help kind of educate and show them how to do that. And then I think they're relieved by that and come alongside and want to partner in that way.
Sounds good. I have another question for you, Adam, from our one of our attendees, from Brian. Curious about clarification about reporting issues with a suicidal ideation, threat, escape, etc. Would there be a specific person designated, the sergeant, or just a staff member that we can contact?
I think you'd have to review that with your own jail, because every jail operates a bit differently, right? And I mean, depending on what it is that you need to share, a suicidal inmate, sharing that information is going to be a bit different than sharing, hey, this person shared that there was some, maybe some drugs in the day room or something. But knowing who that point of contact is, it may change from shift to shift. It may be different from jail to jail. So I would defer to your own jail for that information.
Right. Captain Massengale, do you have any comments about that, about when a professional comes in and meets with somebody reporting suicidal ideations, threats, or escapes in the Monroe County Jail? What is the standard protocol? What would you expect of that behavioral health worker coming into your facility to do?
So we would expect that they would make a contact with the supervisor to let them know what was said, and we would document it in a jail incident report so that we could take the precautions and the protocols that we do for somebody that has those ideations. If we have to see if they're an immediate threat to themselves, that they need suicide garments and all that stuff. Also, like security checks or putting them on a 15-minute watch. So we would just, I reiterate what Adam says. You're going to want to know that information as you're entering into the facility, whoever you're working with, whoever jail administrator it is, and they will lay all that out for you on what the protocol is for that.
Very good, thank you. Renee, I see your question in the Q&A box. That's very specific to Wayne County. So what I'll do is offline, we'll research and get you that contact information. If you can just put some mechanism by which we can contact you back to give you the connection inside the Wayne County Jail to get you the information that you're requesting there. So for Captain Cole, in your experience, is there a common mistake that civilians tend to make when they come into the jail? Like, hello, what are you doing this for? This seems to happen all the time. Something along that just seems to repeat itself.
I don't have anything specific, honestly, or no specific situations that come to mind right now, but I do think one of the largest issues that comes up is the lack of safety understanding. And that is one of the notes that I actually took during this presentation for myself, is actually to do a little bit of follow-up on that. What are we offering visitors when they come in, or new civilian employees? What are we actually training as far as what to look for safety-wise, how to approach an inmate, how to interact with them? I don't know if we're a unique setting, but we do offer a lot of our clinicians and people coming into our jail freedom to interact with the inmates, where the deputies might not be in immediate presence. They're in a visual, but they might not be there at all times, overhearing everything, overseeing every specific interaction. So even for myself as a jail administrator, I took that down as a note, something to follow up on, something to be cognizant of, and something to make sure moving forward that we're all being mindful of. So that would be the biggest thing that comes to my mind.
Very good thing. Can you talk a little bit? I know in my experience, sometimes when professional visitors would be coming into the jail, if we say it's a 1 o'clock visit and maybe they're not as timely as we'd like, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that can present to a correction setting, about timeliness, about if you say this, you're going to be this kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, other panelists have touched on this too, the expectation to wait. We have a lot of unpredictable situations that occur within the facility. And it might be something as simple as our food carts are running late for the day and therefore visits aren't running on time now. Down to the more serious issues of an inmate fight or an assault or something critically medical taking place. So there's a lot of unique circumstances that go on within the correctional setting that I think is also important for any civilian staff entering the facility to understand all of the things that can transpire while you're there and what could potentially, create those situations where they might be waiting on something. The staff are typically very aware when we have visitors waiting. It is an added pressure to them to try to get through their normal day-to-day operations and still have that lingering event of whatever that might be, kind of waiting for them. So not only is it frustrating for the visitors that come in that have to wait, it is daunting on the staff too, to try to get through their normal day-to-day obligations and then proceed with the other things that are still outstanding.
Very good. Thank you, Captain. Renee, can you talk a little bit about sometimes the professionals, the behavioral health specialists are part of like a team, and they've heard sheriff's command staff support their actions or activities. And when they get in, the line staff might be a little bit different. Can you talk about how you kind of navigate some of those challenges? It's like you hear from a captain, like this is something we really support, this is great, and then you get in and you might find a little bit more resistance there. Are there strategies that you can talk about that kind of help for that kind of dynamic?
Yeah, I think, knowing and understanding your role within the correctional facility is really important. Knowing and understanding the rules and the policies that they exist or that exist. But it's all about developing relationships and rapport. And it's not only developing relationships and rapport with the incarcerated individuals or the clients that you're working with, it's really developing that across the board with staff, uniformed and civilian. And so being able to recognize that, yes, you're there to do a job and play a role, but also, make it a point and attempt to connect with those folks, the folks that you're getting the cold shoulder from, but then also the folks that are being helpful and supportive. Word spreads fast. And when people start to see results, and start to understand then the common goal, it makes it a lot easier. But I think, sometimes it's an uncomfortable environment to go into as a provider, us versus them, uniform versus non-uniform. But approaching it like you would with any other colleague, any other relationship, and starting there first, make that connection, will kind of be the key to success.
Well, I think I have time for one quick question, maybe for Captain Masson, if that's okay. Oftentimes, particularly mental health providers will say, my client's in the jail and he's taking these medications A, B, and C. Can I just drop off these medications to your jail? Is that something that they allow, generally speaking, in jails that you're aware of, or particularly in Monroe County Jail?
But that's going to be something, again, that's going to be policy set by typically the sheriff in Monroe. It depends on who that person is. If it's somebody like Adam that I have a relationship with and I know I trust, and I know he's not going to try to bring in something that's contraband, then we would most likely, we would take it. If that person's like a family member and they call up and say, hey, my son's in jail and he has all these meds, I need to drop them off to you, we're not going to take them. Instead, we're going to say, give us the pharmacy information, the doctor information, what does he take in the milligrams, and then we will have our nurses look into that and then get the meds ourselves. Over the years, we just found that there's very easy manipulation that can be done to capsules. And also, a lot of people mix their meds in a bottle. They'll have all kinds of different things inside of it. And you come to the jail and you open it up and you're like, hey, wait a minute, why is there 4 different pills in this bottle? So we try to steer from that, just because we don't want to take ourselves, and we're bringing contraband in the facility now. I'm responsible for whatever I just took in.
Yeah. Well, that concludes the Q&A portion. I just like to again extend my thanks to Captain Cole, Captain Massengale, Renee, and Adam for your expertise in this area. It's unmatched anywhere else in the state. So I appreciate your time. I'll turn it over to Becca for our closing comments and go from there. So thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Thank
To reiterate, Matt, thank you all so much. We couldn't have these trainings without you guys. You guys are doing groundbreaking work in the communities that you serve, and we're so grateful for that. We appreciate you guys being champions of change to improve your communities. Also, thank you to everyone who joined us here today for the first of these 3 trainings. A recording of this webinar will be posted on the CBHJ website, the YouTube page, and MDHHS's website. We will send a copy of the slides and related materials to all attendees as soon as we can. Please also keep an eye out for future events in this area. These webinars will be held every other month, with the next one to be scheduled in March. Last but certainly not least, please do complete the survey after exiting the training. Thank you so much and be well.